Hi, everyone. Welcome. Happy New Year. Thank you for joining us again in 2026. And thank you, everyone who is joining us for the first time. We really appreciate also your interest and for being here. Just a very brief introduction about Kesher. My name is Dora. I'm joining you from Budapest, from Hungary. And you can also find here Sebastian, who is the other Kesher organizer. Is the two of us who started this project 5.5 years ago now. And our mission is to share Jewish history, Jewish culture, Jewish life around the world, and to learn together, and through that create the connection. And that's why we named this project Kesher, which means connection in Hebrew. I know that many of you are members and regulars and have attended many of our talks, and thank you so much for being here once again. And for those who are joining us for the first time, I just want to state that most of our presentations focus on one city or on one country's Jewish heritage, and we do a virtual tour and we really deep dive into these places. Today's presentation is a tiny bit different from that. It's going to have two parts, let's say. In the first part, we'll have a virtual tour of Jewish Scandinavia, which is a very big story. And normally we focus on each country separately. And we actually had a talk with Charlotte, who is one of our speakers today, about Jewish Denmark just a couple of months ago, which was a more in-depth talk. And also in a couple of weeks, we'll have a talk about the Jews of Norway. But today we'll have a special perspective in which we'll learn about the whole region of Scandinavia, which will include Denmark, Norway, and Sweden. And the interesting part about this presentation that actually Charlotte and Ronen Talmey, who are our speakers today, and they are the founders and owners of Jewish Copenhagen, which is a very big, I think the biggest Jewish heritage tour company in Scandinavia. They also plan to run a real life trip in August, this coming August 2026, to these three countries. So after the historical presentation, please stay with us and find out a bit about this tour that they're planning to host. And if you're interested, you can, of course, register and sign up and travel with them. And we'll share all this information with you tomorrow as well. So to not waste more time on introductions, I want to pass the word now to Charlotte and Ronan to share with us about the Jews of Scandinavia.
Just a second. We're ready to start. So I'm not Charlotte, I am Ronen, and this is a free talk, so you actually get two Telmays for the price of one. We are so happy that so many people decided to join us this evening, at least it's evening here in Copenhagen, and to share with you the amazing story about Jewish Scandinavia. And you might ask yourself, what is Jewish Scandinavia? How come it's not one country, but actually we're going to talk about three countries? And even though the three communities were countries, we share a very strong and emotional story together. So, for those of you who may not know exactly what is Scandinavia, here is a very short introduction. Hmm. Yes. So you see the three flags. The Danish flag is the first one because we are Danish. Then you have the Norwegian flag and the Swedish flag. And you have a picture of the big part of Europe. And you can see that the light blue, it's Norway. The brownish is Sweden. And the very little green area is actually Denmark. So we are very small today. The population in all these three countries are only about 22 million people. So it's not a very large amount of people living here, even though it's a very big area. The Scandinavian languages, the Danish, Swedish, and Norwegian, are very similar. We can understand a lot of it when we talk together, and we can read it very easily. There's also about the democratic values. The systems in Denmark and Sweden and Norway are very similar. So it's very easy to adapt what is working very well in Sweden into a Danish context. And we have, of course, the well-known, well-famous welfare system, which make the Scandinavian countries, all of them in the top 10 of the most happy people in the world. Scandinavia has changed size many times. At a certain point back in the 1300s, actually, these three countries were united in what is called the Kalmar Union under one ruler. But of course, that didn't go very well, so they started fighting a lot of wars. But now, today, we stop fighting and just cooperating and have good times. So, now we're going to move into the area about the Jewish communities in the three different countries, and I'm proud to give the word to my wife sitting next to me, Charlotte.
Thank you, Ronen. So I will start by introducing you to Jewish Denmark. Denmark is the smallest out of the three countries, and it is, however, the place where the Jews arrived first. The King Christian IV, whom you're looking at, he was the one who 400 years ago decided to invite Jews to come and settle in Denmark. He was traveling to Holland, to the Netherlands, a few times, and he met some of those Sephardic Jews that came through Portugal, but originally from Spain. And he saw them down there thriving. They were good at a few things that impressed him. Well, they had a good network to other Jews around Europe. They were good at business and they had a little money. So the Danish king here was thinking, since he was just about to have the country of Denmark going bankrupt, let me invite some of those Jews to come and settle here and work for me personally, investing in my business. And so he did. 30 Jewish families arrived back in 1622 and worked for the king. Jews in Denmark did well. They integrated very well. You had Jews who now started coming up from Germany and they settled. So soon the Sephardic Jews, who were the first who got here really, were absorbed by the much larger Ashkenazi group of Jews that came from Germany. And already in 1814, we had the emancipation.
Emancipation.
Emancipation. That meant that almost all rules, all rights were given to the Jews here in Denmark. Note the year 1814, because later in the talk, Ronen here will clear out for you that it was different in other places. Here we have the main synagogue of Copenhagen, the Great Synagogue of Copenhagen, built in 1833. You see beautiful pictures. Of course, it's not the only Jewish community in Denmark. You know, if you have two Jews, you have three opinions. We all know that. So we have many different ones here represented, but this is the oldest one, and this is the main one. It's Orthodox, and it's really thriving. We have around 900 seats in the Copenhagen synagogue. Hans Christian Andersen, why Hans Christian Andersen? Was he Jewish? No, he wasn't, but he had very close connections to the Danish Jews. Now, Hans Christian Andersen wrote many stories. I'm sure that you're familiar with some of those fairy tales. The Little Mermaid is one of them. The Emperor's New Clothes, one of my favorite stories. And of course, The Ugly Duckling. We're mentioning Hans Christian Andersen here because he had very tight connections to Danish Jews. One of the most famous Danish Jewish families is the Melchior family here. Hans Christian Andersen, he was a good friend of the family. With his top hat, as you can see him sitting there telling stories to the children of the Melchior family. They were very, very close friends. Already as a child, Hans Christian Andersen, who grew up in a little village quite far away from Denmark, in an island in the middle of, away from Copenhagen, in the middle of Denmark, called Odense. He went to the so-called Jewish school. It was the school where the local Jews from Odense all went. And that he learned from there that he had many things in common, he felt. So as an older man, he said that I understand the Jews because of mainly four things that I feel that we have in common. Hans Christian Andersen is mentioning these four things as being different, being an outsider. Then he says, I also feel that I
Misunderstood.
am misunderstood. And also, I feel that I'm very talented, just like the Jews themselves. So, this is Hans Christian Andersen. Another interesting story about the Danish Jews is that we had this rabbi called David Simonsen. He wrote a lot of books himself, but as you can tell, he didn't write all of these books, but he was a great collector. He collected books from all over the world, all with a Jewish theme. Some books in Yiddish, some in Spanish, and others in Hebrew. You actually have an example up here to the right, which is an old original Rambam from the 1200s that he collected and passed over eventually when his wife felt there was no room for her any longer in their home. He decided to hand over all the 25,000 books that he collected to the Danish Royal Library. And in the picture down there to your right on the bottom, you see the Danish Royal Library, and in front of it is the entrance to the Danish Jewish Museum, which today is a part of that very building where the Danish Royal Library is, and therefore also the Judaica collection with all those books from Rabbi Simonsen back in the 1800s. When we reach the 1800s, especially in the end of the 1800s, 1880, and into the 1900s, we have this period of time where the Jews from Eastern Europe, because of the pogroms, are leaving. We all know they were heading for America. Most of them got there. They had to pass through a Western country somewhere on the way. Most of them couldn't go all the way directly from Poland, from Russia, and so on. So many went through the port of Copenhagen. We had many boats. We had a route already going directly to Ellis Island from the port here in Copenhagen. For those of you who read Yiddish, you can see that this, and I'll tell you what it says in Danish on the top, this first Jewish magazine in Scandinavia, but in Yiddish called Wochenblatt. So this Wochenblatt, the weekly magazine, was printed and made here in Copenhagen by those immigrants whom, like many of them, you can tell were Schneiders, were tailors, and they lived in small workshops where they also slept and had all their staff working. So, by the way, those Eastern Europe immigrants that came here in the end of the 1800s, those were our ancestors, our great grandparents that came to Denmark back in the days. We reach April 9th. April 9th is where the date when the Nazis decided to occupy Denmark. This is World War II. Denmark is in shock. The Danes didn't expect the Nazis to march in. That's physically what they did. March into Denmark. We share a border. So here they were, and Denmark was in the middle of this whole chaos. And what to do? We had sorry to say, a pathetic little army that really wouldn't have changed a lot. So the Danish government were thinking what to do, what to do. They sat down with the Nazi occupiers and they made an agreement. That meant that for the first 3 years of the war, from 1940 to 1943, between the Germans and the Danes, there was this agreement that they could occupy, they were here, they were calling the shots, as long as the Danes didn't interfere and so sort of tolerated their presence. The Nazis, would, on the other hand, not arrest the Danish Jews, they would not kill them. Copenhagen wasn't bombed. Very few cases that took place nearly by accident. Otherwise, it was quite peaceful. Which also meant that the Jews, and that was on the table from the Danish government, a part of this agreement has to be, you cannot take our 7,000 Danish Jews. And they agreed. The Nazis needed easy countries where they didn't have to use their resources as they had so many other places. So they were happy sitting on Denmark, controlling Denmark and the body of water and the access to Norway and to Russia and to all that they needed. The Nazis, we will hear more about that later. So now they were sitting on Denmark. The Danish king, Christian X, was not happy. I'm sure if he knew Yiddish, he would have said, what chutzpah that those Germans are coming here and occupying my country. The article here that you see is an article that was printed in the New York Times. And you know, when you read something in the paper, that is the truth. We all know that, especially these days. But in this case, it's about the king who actually didn't wear the star. It says he was ready to wear it. He did say, if my Jews have to identify themselves as Jews wearing this yellow star, I will be wearing it as well. Well, because of the cooperation, the deal between the Nazis and the Danish government, the Danish Jews were the only people who were never told to wear the yellow star. Now, here at the end of 1943, when we have an uprising because the Danes no longer accept this occupation, definitely the Nazis would now, because they changed their minds, because they don't have the cooperation any longer, they definitely would have liked the Danish Jews to wear the star, but you will find out that in a moment, the Jews are gone. So no Jews to wear the star any longer. Because when you had the uprising and when you had this not acceptance of this cooperation any longer, it meant that the Nazis said, okay, why would we not go for the Danish Jews? Then we certainly will. They didn't succeed, and they didn't succeed because of a few different, I would say, miracles. The first one is that this naval officer, you see him up here, he's called Duckwitz. He is the naval officer representing Nazi Germany, controlling all the coastlines and the boats coming in and out from the coast from Denmark. And we have a lot of coastline. So he's in control of that. And he is told from Germany, you know, you have to clear the longest pier in Copenhagen and make sure we can send up a very large ship. We're going to round up all the 7,000 Danish Jews. Now we're taking them down to the concentration camps. Duckwitz, for some reason, he doesn't agree with that message. He decides that he wants to leak this piece of information. He knows some people in the Danish government. He tells them, look, we are about to arrest all the Jews. See if you can tell them and maybe they can do something about it. These two politicians are running to the head of the Jewish community, the chairman. His name was Henricus. And they tell him, look, we have this from a very reliable source. It's about time to get out of here. So the first reaction of the chairman of the Jewish community is, you're lying. He simply doesn't want to believe it. 3 years went by. Yes, they heard stories about Jews around Europe that were arrested and sent to the camps. But here, nothing happened so far. Would that change? Very naively, you don't want to believe that now it concerns you. But luckily, he didn't take any chances, and therefore he passed the message to the rabbi. The rabbi, and this is the next miracle in this story, is going on to his bimah in the synagogue of Copenhagen, standing there saying Shana Tova to the Jewish community. This is Rosh Hashanah. How lucky can you be? It's packed with all the Danish Jews. They're almost all there. Now they are told, look, we got to get out of here. They're coming after us. How do you leave a country? Well, luckily we had Sweden next door. Sweden was neutral. So, more about that later, but neutral enough to finally accept that they would get the Danish Jews. So being a part of the Danish resistance, being a part of this great rescue, went all the way from the king himself to the fishing men and to the Lutheran Church of Denmark. Here you have the main principles of what Bishop Hans Fuglsang Damgaard sent out to all the churches in Denmark in the beginning of October 1943 to make sure that every single person who would hear about Jews who needed to be helped out of the country would be not only willing to, but also would feel obligated to. So here you have it all listed. And when Dora and Sebastian will eventually send you this, this whole talk, you can see for yourself how many good arguments they had. No excuses not to help the Jews here. One place where many Jews were hiding was the Bispebjerg Hospital. It's a hospital in the outskirts of Copenhagen. It's functioning as a hospital still, one of the bigger ones. And out there were 2,000 Copenhagen Jews. When I'm saying, by the way, Copenhagen Jews, almost all of the Jews lived in Copenhagen. That is still the case. 95% of all the Danish Jews are in Copenhagen. So where to put all these 7,000 people waiting for the time to be ripe so they can get to a fishing village, so they can get on a fishing cutter, so they can eventually get out of here to the safe haven over there in Sweden. The hospital was housing 2,000, approximately 2,000 of the Jews, hiding them and putting them into the beds, taking away their Jewish names. So at the end of the bed where you have your name written, it was no longer Rosenbaum or Schwartz. It was now Hansen or Jensen or Petersen or another typical Danish name. And they gave them diseases. They came up with a kidney stone or high blood pressure, whatever it was that they pretended they had to check. And as you can see, eventually they got out from here, they got to the fishing villages, they got away to Sweden. And the Beth Israel Medical Center in New York put a plaque on one of the buildings here where they were hiding in the chapel, actually, of the hospital before they eventually left. It says, and I have translated it from the plaque in Danish into English. Beth Israel Medical Center in New York greets and pays tribute to Bispebjerg Hospital in Copenhagen, a key player in the rescue of thousands of Danish Jews in October 1943. We admire the humanity, courage, and self-sacrificing efforts shown by doctors, nurses, and the other hospital employees. So everybody was honoring them and being very grateful. That's very understandable. Some of you might know about Niels Bohr, who was a Danish scientist. He was Danish, he was Jewish, he was a scientist, he was very famous. The 500 kroner bill on the top shows how famous he was in this country because he was on it, on one of the former notes here. And as you can see down in the corner, it says he was a Nobel Prize winner in 1922. He was the creator of the quantum theory. He also found out how you could split the atom, by the way. And he was invited by the Manhattan Project, or not by the Manhattan, by the US government, about joining the Manhattan Project down in New Mexico. He accepted. He had to get out of here first, occupied Denmark, and here he was getting out of here. He got into a rowing boat with another family. They got to the coast of Sweden. He made his way up to Stockholm, the capital, and from there on, eventually he flew to London, and from there on to the US. Now, before he left for the US, he wanted to talk to the Swedish king. Only problem was he didn't know him personally. The king knew about Niels Bohr. He was already famous back then, but, well, didn't feel like opening his doors to the castle. Luckily, there was this lady, and she's written there, she's mentioned Greta Garbo, the Swedish-American actress who later became very famous in the US. She knew both of the gentlemen and she connected them. And therefore, he could put pressure, Niels Bohr, on the Swedish king and tell him to open the borders and let in all the Danish Jews because they were in danger. And others, by the way, who were in danger of the Nazis. Bohr and Oppenheimer, well, maybe you saw the movie Oppenheimer a few years ago that got many Oscars, and obviously Bohr is in it. It's one of the characters, so it's a very interesting story. Courage to act, that's what this rescue was all about. Those of you who are from New York, we might have some with us today, or some have visited New York maybe, and you might have seen there is a very big exhibition at the Holocaust Museum in Battery Park in New York. If you have a chance to go and see it, please do. It does tell about it's called The Courage to Act, what the Danes did, how it was possible for the rescue. You will get it in depth if you see the exhibition. Here we are pointing out that the man here to the left is called Einar Larsen. He owned a fishing cutter. That's the one in the middle called Elizabeth. And my family was on it. My grandmother and my father, 8 years old, were on this very fishing cutter being sailed to Sweden into the safety away from the Nazis. He was going many times, and of course, it was in the middle of the night. And of course, he has been honored in many different ways. The family you see on the right, that's a sister and her three brothers, is the family Schneider. The Schneider family were not that lucky that got on a fishing cutter, so they went into a rowing boat and they themselves rowed all the way to Sweden. Most narrow spot is 5 kilometers, but it also ranges up to 16 kilometers depending on where you go from. So it can be a long trip. The oar broke, as you can tell. They're sitting there. They went back afterwards the next day and had this picture taken, proving that they themselves made it away from the war zone to the freedom in Sweden, and that the oar that broke, even though, helped them getting all the way. Today at the Museum of the Resistance, you can see this oar in one of the cabinets, the real one. In Sweden, it was where all the Danish Jewish kids went to school. In the middle, between the two adults, the very nice lowest of them, I don't know if the cursor can tell, I don't know if you can see, this is my father. He is here in the middle of the two teachers. So he was there with all the other Danish Jewish kids in a Jewish school of Gothenburg, second largest city in Sweden, before he and all the other Jews eventually returned to Denmark when the war was over, and they came back in May 1945. Not only the Jews were saved, also our precious Torah scrolls, and we have many, were saved by a priest, a minister from this Lutheran church nearby. He made sure during a night in early October 1943 to get hold of an ambulance together with the mayor, and the two of them made sure that all the Torah scrolls came to the church, and they were hidden down under the floor, under the altar, down in the crypt. And that's where Christian Petersen, the very minister of the church, looked after them for the rest of the war before they got back to the Jewish community. Not everybody made it. 472 of the Danish Jews were arrested. They were sent to Theresienstadt outside of Prague. 52 of those were murdered in the Theresienstadt camp. All the goodies you see up here, the package was sent by the Danish government that made sure that all the Danish Jews down in the camp received once a month a package full of maybe not so kosher meat, but at least things that you could eat if you wanted to, and that helped them being a little more privileged than the others, and even more so privileged at the end of the war when it was over. The white buses painted white by the Count of Sweden, Folke Bernadotte, made sure to go and pick up all the Scandinavians from the war zone in the end of the war. And so all the surviving Danish Jews that were in Theresienstadt were picked and fetched to get back home to Denmark. The stumbling stones, you might be familiar with it, is all over Europe. Today there are just around 116,000 stumbling stones. It's a monument, the largest decentralized monument in the world, telling about people who were victims of the Holocaust, or of the Nazis, really, in 31 different countries. And in Denmark, though many were saved, the majority, we still today have around 159 stumbling stones here in Denmark. And Isaac Vanjevis is Ronen's great-grandfather. So he had one because he was taken and sent to Theresienstadt. And the one to the right, Jacob, that is my grandfather, who unfortunately was as one of the very few who were Jews of Denmark who were not in Sweden. He was not in Theresienstadt. He was in fact murdered. He was on the death march from Auschwitz to Melk, where he passed. However, this is the country where 97% of the Jews were surviving. Some came back from the camp, some came back from Sweden, but it's a very large percentage of Jews that survived the Holocaust here in Denmark. To round up with the Danish Jews, we just want to get out of the Holocaust and to present times. How did Danish Jews have an influence and impact here in Denmark? Well, to the left, we have Meyer Hermann Bing. He was the one who created Royal Copenhagen. You might know that beautiful porcelain that still is being produced. Then we have Philip Heimann, who was behind the brewery of Tuborg beer, obviously. Then we have Arne Jacobsen, who was a great designer, many chairs, kitchenware, buildings. He was also an architect. He is behind. And In a Better World was a movie that got the Oscar a few years ago for winning the best movie in a foreign, meaning not English language. And the director was the Danish Jewish Susanne Bier, who's also doing a lot of other shows these days. And that takes us to the end of the Danish chapter. Jewish life in Denmark today. We are still around 6 to 7,000 Jews. We have a Jewish community in Copenhagen, and soon we are expanding, opening up a smaller group of for fewer Jews, obviously, in the second largest city of Aarhus. We have a culture butcher, we have a nursing home, kindergarten, school, Jewish museum, Jewish organizations, and associations. So it's a very thriving and very active Jewish community. So that was Denmark.
So I will continue from here, and thank you, Charlotte. And of
Okay.
course, to squeeze in all these stories in about 20, 25 minutes, it's impossible. There are so many layers of how this was possible to rescue all the Danish Jews. This is something, of course, you can learn more about later on. We'll tell about that. So moving on to Norway. And yeah,
That's your
just
sign.
somebody's talking right now. Yeah,
No.
yeah. So going back to the beginning about Scandinavia, actually Norway belonged to Denmark for many centuries. But in 1814, the same year as the Danish Jews were granted emancipation and the rights of the civil rights equally to the Danish, the Christian population, in Norway they broke away because Denmark was on the side of Napoleon, who lost the wars, and then Norway left the union with Denmark. And that year, in 1814, they had their constitution made, stating that no Jews should be allowed to come and settle and to gain citizenship in the country of Norway. So suddenly, Scandinavia splits up in different directions, and I'll tell you a little bit about that. So this very intellectual guy, his name was Henrik Wergeland. He was a Norwegian writer and poet. He was very famous. He was very well respected. You have, like Niels Bohr, you have 100 kroner note, Norwegian money. So he was very, very famous. And he was a humanist, and he was really very active promoting that Jews should have the right to settle in Norway. So, in a few times in the mid of the 1800s, the Storting, the parliament in Norway, were discussing this subject. He wrote small stories and poems that he sent around to influential people to hope to motivate them to vote for the right for Jews to settle in Norway. What was their fear? Why were they afraid of letting Jews in? Because they feared a mass immigration. And the joke and the irony is that when the Jews got permission to stay in and become citizens in 1851, 30 years later, there were about 30 Jews in Norway. So mass immigration, I think not. So the very first person who were allowed to come and settle in Norway, in Oslo, or as it was called, Christiania back then, was Abraham Wellman. He came from Germany. He had a license to have a business from Hessen in Germany, and he moved up to Norway. And just imagine being the very first Jew there. You're all alone, no Jewish community, no kosher meat, no synagogue, nothing. But he was a very entrepreneur person. So he went there, and already a few months after he arrived in July 1852, he posted an ad in the big Oslo newspaper saying, I opened this business. I have jewelry from Paris and from Offenbach, a German city, and come to my shop. And he became a very successful businessman. So throughout the 1800s, Jews started very, very slowly to move in the beginning from Germany, even from Denmark, maybe Sweden, up to the north, to Norway. And Norway at that time was not like Norway today with all the Teslas and all the oil wealth that they have today. It was a very poor country with a very bad infrastructure. So it was very difficult to move around in that country. And that's why most people think, okay, we're going to stay maybe in Denmark. It's much easier to go around in the world from Denmark. But a few Jews decided to come and stay. And in 1892, the first synagogue opened up in Norway. It was not a big synagogue like you have in Copenhagen. It was an apartment. But in 1920, they raised money to build a real synagogue, which you can see today is the Oslo Synagogue. And they really didn't have any rabbis to come and take up the job here in Norway. So they invited a rabbi in Denmark, his name was Marcus Melchior, to come and make the first drasha, the first speech prayer in the synagogue. And just before I'm going to show you a little bit about Marcus Melchior, I want to just to state that the rabbi in the synagogue in Copenhagen at the very end of September 1943 was also the same rabbi, Marcus Melchior, who were telling people to go home, get a suitcase, and hide because the Nazis were coming. So he was very influential, and there is a very strong bond between the Danish and the Norwegian Jewish community even today. So here's a fun fact about the Melchior family. Because, and actually, the father in law of Marcus Melchior to the left was also the chief rabbi in Denmark. And then his son became the chief rabbi, and his son, the grandson of Marcus Michael, his education to be a rabbi is paid by the Norwegian Jewish community. So he comes back around 1980, becomes the chief rabbi in Norway, and now he retired. He sends his son Joav Melchior, who is the recent chief rabbi of Norway, and to the right you have his brother Yair Melchior. Surprise, he's the chief rabbi in Denmark. So they are like the show Succession, that they're all ancestors from this rabbinical lineage, and they try very hard to keep alive a sort of an Orthodox life in both Norway and Denmark. Even though Charlotte and I decided making this presentation, this talk, that not everything should be about the Holocaust and World War II, it is very difficult not to touch this subject, also especially talking about Norway, because Norway was attacked the same day as Denmark in April 9th. They decided to fight and not to surrender immediately. And the Norwegian king and the government went into exile in England, and there was a Nazi government installed in Norway. So the Norwegian Jews had a very different destiny than the Danish Jews. The first 2 years of the war, nothing really happened. They didn't have to wear the yellow star and they were not arrested. But suddenly, within 1 or 2 days, the Nazis decided now we're going to take all the Norwegian Jews. And because this was not prepared, there was no leakage of information like in Denmark with Dukwitz telling the Danish politicians, there were no warnings. So they had no time to prepare what to do. So within a few days, they actually managed to arrest almost 40% of the Jewish population in Norway, most of them living in Oslo. And they were sent on a ship, the SS Donau. You can see it on the top. This is a real picture of them waiting to come on board. They were sent not to Theresienstadt, unfortunately, then they would have had a better chance to survive, but straight to Auschwitz, where most of them died. It was 773 people, and only 34 survived and returned after the war. So, what happened to the rest of the Norwegian Jews? Of course, when they found out that people were getting arrested, they just ran away and tried to find a place to hide. And like in Denmark, they needed assistance from the resistance movement, how to get to Sweden. Sweden was neutral, as mentioned before, but the distances of going from Oslo and other Norwegian cities to Sweden was much more difficult than just getting people to a fishing village and on a skip fishing cutter to Sweden. So they had to create an initiative. And the picture up here on the left, his name is Rolf Sylversen. And together with another Norwegian policeman, they founded a rescue route called the Carl Fredriksen Transport. There was no Karl Frederiksen. It was an invented name to honor the Norwegian king, who was actually named Karl Frederick. And they started organizing transportation of Norwegian Jews across mountains, through forests, the last part of it on foot, to walk across to the Swedish border. And he and his initiative were active of rescuing about 500 Norwegian Jews, which is a lot. It was about 50% of the ones that were not caught. Other groups did so as well. So about 1,000 Norwegian Jews managed to escape to Sweden and thereby surviving the Holocaust. In the bottom right corner, you have a memorial coin commemorating and honoring this amazing deed that Rolf Silverson started up. And he had a very tragic end because in 1944 he was arrested and he was executed. Some inspiration for you. There is a movie, it's from 2020. It's a Norwegian movie called The Crossing. And it's in generally talking about what happened to the Norwegian Jews when they had to escape, but seen through the eyes of children. And you have a family, a Christian family that hides Jewish children. They are arrested, and then it's up to the two kids, they're not very old, I think 10 and 12, to bring these Jewish children across the forest with the Nazi collaborators and German patrols everywhere with dogs hunting them down. But in the end, eventually and hopefully, they went across the border to Sweden. You can see this on Amazon Prime. We bought it. It cost $1, so it's not very expensive, and it's really an amazing movie for you to watch to learn more about this episode of Norwegian Jewish life. So how does it look today? Norway is the smallest Jewish community we have. It's only about 1,500 to 200 Jews, most of them living in Oslo. But there is an active Jewish community and a synagogue in Trondheim, very north in Norway. And actually, they celebrated 100 years anniversary last year in 2025. And it is considered to be the northernmost synagogue in the world. It's very high up north, but they still have a service, I think every Shabbat, but at least for the high holidays. And still in Norway, you have synagogues and you have kosher, grocery, nursing homes, the same things as you have in Denmark. So this is a little bit about Norway. Now we're going to move into Sweden. Because the Swedes had a completely different story. In 1774, a German guy, Aaron Isaac, is the first Jew to come and settle in the Swedish Empire. And he is granted civil rights and becomes a citizen, and he forms the first Jewish community in Stockholm. However, the parliament and the king, they have restrictions on which cities can Jews live. At the time, it was Stockholm, Gothenburg, and Norrköping. Throughout the 1700s and the beginning of the 1800s, very few Jews went to Sweden, but they formed different Jewish communities throughout the 1800s. So what was the story about Sweden during World War II? If you look at this map to the right, you see Sweden is the only country close to Norway and Denmark that are neutral. You have Switzerland in the middle of Europe, and you had Ireland left of the United Kingdom. So our miracle in the Scandinavian countries were that Sweden was actually an option to escape to. The Swedes were not really very keen on getting Jews from Denmark and Norway. It's not like they would send them back, but yeah, they didn't want to offend the Nazis and draw too much attention. But they opened up for the Norwegian Jews in the end of 1942, and as Charlotte told you, about 97% of the Danish Jews came into safety in Sweden in October 1943. Sweden, they were assisting the Nazi regime. They were opening up their rails, their tracks for the German troops to be sent through Sweden to Norway and to Finland. And they made a fortune dealing with the Nazis during Second World War. And we think that had they not taken in all the Jews, they would maybe have been considered to be an ally of the Nazis and not a neutral state. But that's a longer story you can learn about later on. I just want to share with you the story of Raoul Wallenberg. Wallenberg was born into a very, very rich and influential Swedish family, the Wallenbergs. He himself had, like, his great grandfather was Jewish, and he was very open about it. He was very proud of his Jewish heritage. And he said about himself, being Jewish and being a Wallenberg makes me unbeatable. So he was like like he had amazing courage, and he thought of himself, I can do miracles being who I am. He was sent to Hungary in 1944 to see if he could help rescuing Hungarian Jews when they were starting to deport them to the camps. So he had with him a lot of Swedish passports and safe passes that if he could give them to the Jews, they could claim that they are Swedish citizens or belonging to the Swedish state. They were sent to special Swedish safe houses. And sometimes Raoul Wallenberg went to the train station and were pulling out Jews on the way to the camps, stating, they have a Swedish passport, they are Swedish citizens, you cannot send them to the camp. And the amazing thing was that he actually managed to save about 50,000 Hungarian Jews. 50,000. This was one person with the local staff working in Budapest in Hungary. He was also working with the Americans and Russia. When they entered Hungary in 1945 in January, they thought he was an American spy. So they captured and arrested him, and nobody knows about his whereabouts. He was never delivered after the war. Nobody knows if he died in captivity, if he stayed alive for many, many years. And even today, like, a lot of mystic about his life that's still very intriguing to learn about. And Raoul Wallenberg is honored all over the world, except for Sweden, for many, many years. Then in the 1990s, the Swedish government decided now it's time to commemorate Raoul Wallenberg more properly, and they have the Raoul Wallenberg Square, and they have this stone placed there and a big monument honoring his amazing deed during the Second World War. In Sweden, in the synagogue, behind the synagogue, they made this menorah monument. After the war, including the 420 Danish Jews coming with the white buses, Sweden took in more than 20,000 Jewish Holocaust survivors and refugees. They stayed there from maybe 1945 to 1948. Then many of them left for the US, Israel, or went back to their home countries. But a few thousand decided to stay. And most of them actually, they lost everything. They had no graves for their beloved and their friends and relatives. So they decided to make this monument. We have 8,500 engraved names to commemorate all the people that stayed in Sweden, the Jews after the war, could keep them alive, a living memory of those who passed. It's a beautiful thing. And the synagogue is also very beautiful. So it's really something to see. I'm going to go into a few fun facts about very famous Jews who were also Swedish. The woman to the right is Greta Garbo, and somehow she managed to get into this talk 2 times because she was also the actress who helped Niels Bohr get in contact with the Swedish king. But before she was famous, there was a very famous Swedish Jewish director of silent movies. His name was Morris Stiller. He had Polish, Lithuanian Jewish parents. It's him in the middle, looking very thoughtful. And he made in 1924 a very, very ambitious movie called Gösta Berling's Saga. It's based on a novel by Selma Lagerlöf, the famous Swedish Nobel Prize winner. And he needed a leading actress for this movie, and he discovered Greta Garbo. She was only 19 at the time, pretending she was a mature woman in the movie. And that movie made her instantly very, very famous. And they went to the US together in 1925, where she became world famous. On a personal note, just to let you know a little bit about me personally, I am also accompanying and making music for silent movies. So this movie I played to a few times, and it's always a great privilege to see great actors Greta Garbo in company with Maurits Stiller. And then something you probably never heard about. If you see the pictures to the right and to the left, you might recognize the universe of Astrid Lindgren. You have Pippi Longstocking and Emil from Lønneberga. In the 1970s, they produced movies about all Astrid Lindgren's books. And they found a composer, his name was Geo Riedel. And his music for these movies and series are considered to be the most Swedish of Swedish music today. The funny thing is that he was born in the Czech Republic. He had a Czech Jewish mother and a German father, and they left the Czech Republic just before the outbreak of the war, where they moved to Sweden, where he became a very celebrated composer, jazz musician. In the very end of his life, he was very occupied with his Jewish roots, and he had a project called Yiddish Land. But to round up Sweden, a few details about 15 to 20,000 Jews. They are in different cities, not only in one city, in Stockholm, Gothenburg, Malmö, Helsingborg, Uppsala, and Lund. And since in Sweden, if you are recognized as a minority, you have the right to have a language taught in the university. So it is actually possible to come to Sweden and to study Yiddish at the Lund University. I thought about going there, but I've been so busy doing this presentation. But maybe one day. So to round up, three countries united by history, we really realized during this presentation that during the Second World War, 97% of the Danish Jews and 50% of the Norwegian Jews all met with the Swedish Jews in Sweden. And that, of course, created very strong bonds. And I know of relatives to Swedish families that hosted my father when he was a refugee in Sweden. So we have a strong bond amongst the different communities. The language, the culture, the social welfare system makes it quite easy for people to move around the Scandinavian areas if you intermarry to a Swedish Jewish family or into a Norwegian Jewish family. And many of our friends, they have a father or mother from a different Scandinavian country.
So many mixed marriages
Yeah.
there between Jews and Jews in Scandinavia. I think the last picture tells it all. It's about the next generation. This is a very recent photo. It's just a week old. This is the SHUF delegation. SHUF is the Scandinavian Jewish Youth Federation. It has existed for more than 100 years. And every single year, between Christmas and New Year, there is a conference. Okay, call it conference. It's partying 3 or 4 days in a row. All the Scandinavian Jewish youth is having a great time. And this is the Danish delegation. I think it was last year, though, going to join it. And this year it was in Gothenburg in Sweden. It moves around, and it comes to Copenhagen. It's in Oslo and all around Scandinavia. Also, because we are such small Jewish communities here, we don't have our own birthright groups going to Israel. So we unite. We have all the kids in a group going to Israel. Swedish, Norwegian, and Danish Jewish young people joining and gathering, going there. So it seems like the future of the Scandinavian Jews is also settled. Let's hope for that. And I think that concludes our first part of our introduction now. And in a minute or so, after a few questions, Dora and Sebastian will take over that now. And then we will go on and tell you about the magnificent tour we are arranging for you here in August this summer.
Thank you so much, Charlotte and Ronan. It was really, really interesting to overview these three countries together with you. I'll really just read a couple of questions, and I do encourage everyone to stay with us and learn about the actual real life tour that they are organizing. One of the questions was there were many other Nordic countries in the chat mentioned, Iceland, Finland. Can you tell us why exactly these three countries are considered Scandinavia and what's the difference between Scandinavia and Nordic countries?
It's a
We
very good question because if you talk about the Nordic countries, it also includes Finland and Iceland. So why is Scandinavia something else? It's also because of the history. It was united into one under one ruler, the Kalmar Union, and the language is very similar. Finnish is not as easy to understand, and
It's actually
Icelandic,
like Hungarian.
yeah.
Finnish and Hungarian are very close.
So, because the countries are more united by history and by linguistics and things like that, we consider this to be Scandinavia. And if you want to have the Nordic countries, you also add Iceland and Finland.
And not to forget about the Faroe Islands and Greenland, but they belong to Denmark, as we all know.
Yeah, for now.
Still.
Thank you. Then there were several questions about anti-Semitism. I know that always comes up, but if you can mention a little bit about in the three countries, how do you feel about that these days?
Right. So we are in the same boat as everybody else in the Western world, I believe in the whole world. So we have seen after October 7th a lot of increasing demonstrations from the river to the sea, tending outside the universities, young people who don't know much of history being very anti-Zionist. So yes, we have seen our share of it. What would you add to that?
Yeah, what would like it turns out that the three countries they approach this subject differently, and so in Norway they were very much against Israel, but in Denmark, the prime minister was very much pro-Israel and protecting Israel. And she really took a lot of heat from people that called her like baby killer and can you support the genocide and things like that. So it's different, but it's not like we feel unsafe that it's not safe to be Jew here and we can be attacked. A lot of security, obviously, but now since the war sort of stopped and it's not in the news media anymore, it's like it's vanishing. Like all the time before that, when it's not in the newspaper, it's like it closes down and it's not so intense anymore. Nobody, it's also winter time now. They don't want to go to the street to have like a pro-Palestinian demonstration anymore.
It's just too
It's
cold.
just too cold and it's not really, yeah, let's find another topic now to support.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I'll close this part of the questions. I know that there are many questions, and I want to thank everyone who shared their family stories in the chat. And I'll just read one comment from that because I thought it was very interesting. I don't know if you've ever heard of this story or if it's true, but one of the participants shared, I had a Danish friend who was listening to the radio in Copenhagen during World War II. The Nazi newscaster said that there had been a fierce battle, but the Axis powers were victorious, and it would be just a few weeks more until the Nazi forces would triumph. The Danish disc jockey then came on the air. He said nothing but aired the recording of a song from Porgy and Bess. It ain't necessarily so.
Nice story.
Nice
It's a
story.
nice story. I don't know if
Yeah.
it's how true is that, but I thought it was lovely. So we'll get back to questions if we have time later. But now I want to give a moment to Charlotte and Ronan to share with us what they're planning for this trip in August.
Thank you very much, Dora. So this idea of doing a Jewish Scandinavia heritage tour, it has been living with us for a few years. We have traveling around the Scandinavian conference many times. We have friends in Sweden and Norway, and like researching for this talk, we really realized how much we have in common. And especially this thing about all the Jews being united in Sweden. It's something we didn't really thought about before. But it's something that even though we had very different path to Jewish life in the three countries, as mentioned in 1814, the Danish Jews were granted civil rights. In Norway, they were prohibited even to come and settle. So even though the three countries are very similar in structure and language, they have different Jewish history, but all coming together during the Second World War, creating a very strong sense of belonging, not only to the Jewish community in your home country in Denmark, but to feel like Scandinavia is a part of you too. And this is something we would like to share with you on this tour, not just going to Sweden and Norway and Denmark on one trip, but actually to experience the similarities and the differences from the three Jewish communities, how it is today, how it was throughout history. But before we go more into detail, instead of having the 10 commandments, we have like the 10 reasons why you should do a Jewish heritage tour. And you can read for yourself. I'll just mention a few of them, and you will get the slides later on if you want to dig in more deep. We have this saying that you get the best of both worlds 3 times in Denmark, in Sweden, and in Norway on one tour. It's not just coming to visit Copenhagen, but you actually have a program that goes from one place to the other in perfect harmony. And it's not going to be a big group. We're not going to gather like 60 people being in a mass group. It's going to be about 20, maybe 25 people in this group. So it's going to be quaint and family style for everybody participating. Of course, you will have dining with local foods in authentic restaurants. You will have the chance to meet Jewish leaders in each country to know about what is the situation right now. Not to mention that Scandinavia has very clean air and sustainable environment. And one big thing is that, the Visit Denmark, they're talking about promoting that tourists want to come for the climate to Denmark, not because it's raining a lot, but because in the summertime, going to Barcelona, Madrid, to Paris, to Athens, and cities like that, Rome, it's very, very hot in the summer and it's extremely crowded. Coming to Scandinavia, as you saw, a lot of space. It's never too crowded, and the weather in the summer is very, very pleasant. And there are a few things we're going to mention later on, so I won't say there, but you will see it when you receive the recording after this session. We have composed 3 postcards for you that Charlotte's going to take you through.
Yeah, could you move these pictures, please, so I can see the ones behind? First, Copenhagen, as you can see by looking at those pictures here, definitely Danish pastry is for sure something that the Danes are very proud of. Maybe some of you saw this show, the American show, The Bear, which is about a chef that wants to learn about creating the famous Danish pastry. So that's what we have a lot of everywhere. Famous bakeries, famous architects and designers. You have Arne Jacobsen chair here. Sailing is a lot of the things we do here. It's a lot of the charm. This is one thing we have in common, all the Scandinavian main cities here, that we have a lot of sea surrounding us. So canals, castles, beautiful architecture all over. Ooh. Can I move on to the next one?
Yeah.
I can. So, yeah. So here we are in Oslo. Oslo has a lot of modern architecture, breathtaking nature. We're also going to go to a part of the fjords on this tour. Afterwards, we're going to tell you the itinerary so you can see how much we're going to explore and see not only the fascinating cities, but also the pretty nature, especially in Norway, I must say. So a lot of iconic buildings and architecture all over. It wants to stay in Oslo. Here we are in Stockholm, Sweden. They're very famous in Sweden for the very heart of the city called Gamla stan, which means the old city. And when you say old, it's old. It goes back 300-400 years, sometimes even older, and the buildings are still standing. Very colorful, very charming. Castles, the city hall, where you have the Nobel Prize given every year. Nobel was, of course, Swedish. And then you have the archipelago, all the islands. There are thousands of islands in the Stockholm area, and we will be seeing some of that on our tour as well. Would you like to say, just go over a little of the...
It's not going to be a read through, but this is just in short terms the itinerary of the program. And it's a combination of seeing the cities. We call it Charming Copenhagen City Tour. It's going to be the same in Stockholm and in Oslo, where you get all the general sites and the key landmarks. And then we dig into the Jewish part on a different tour in these 3 countries. And then we added as an extra bonus a day in Denmark, in North Zealand, going up to the amazing art museum Louisiana and also to visit the Kronborg Castle, known as the Hamlet Castle, because this was where Shakespeare he placed the story of his Hamlet in this castle. And up there, you will see some cities that are very significant to Jewish life and to the rescue of Danish Jews, ending in the evening in Copenhagen at the Jewish Community
Communities.
Center with a lovely Shabbat dinner.
So, what is included in this trip? Hotel for 8 nights. We have carefully picked brilliant hotels, charming areas, very nice, luxurious 5 or 4 star hotels, all including a full breakfast every morning. We have an overnight cruise from Copenhagen to Oslo. We have the flight included from Oslo to Stockholm. All the entrance fees are a part of it as well, and all tours, including guides and buses, the two transfers in as a part of the tours, and 7 lunches, local food, of course, 4 dinners, including the Shabbat dinner. You're going to meet local Jewish leaders in all the 3 different countries. And of course, you're going to have a Jewish tour leader. That's going to be me. I have the honor of being a part of the tour all around. The price is there, 5,800 in a shared double room per person. And if you are single, it's 6,990. We need your registration in before June, the latest, June 1st.
So instead of flying from Copenhagen to Oslo, we decided to put in this overnight cruise in a beautiful cabin, and you will sail in the afternoon and through the nights, and in the evening they have an amazing buffet for you to enjoy. They have live music where you can dance, and in the morning, approaching Oslo, you will have this scenic view of the Oslo fjords coming into Oslo city. And just a few pictures about the hotels that we picked for you. We have the one hotel in Copenhagen. It's a completely new rebuilt hotel opened up this year or last year. And we have the Hotel Karl Johan in Oslo in a beautiful square in the center of the city. And the very prominent Hotel Kung Karl in Stockholm.
And then we're going to conclude with a few pictures here, a few postcards. You can see castles and modern design, pretty old buildings, interior of the Rosenborg Castle in Copenhagen there on the bottom, and so on. Those are all the general sites, and of course, to conclude this Jewish heritage tour, which is a very important part of it, many of the Jewish sites that we are going to visit.
I just want to add that in the top left corner, you see this fishing cutter. That is the fishing cutter Elizabeth. It's still around. This is the boat where Charlotte's father and grandmother, they escaped to Sweden with Einar Larsen in 1943. So there are going to be many stories in all of Scandinavia. It's also going to be personal stories. We're going to have Jewish Norwegian guides and Jewish Swedish guides. So you'll get an in-depth first-person perspective of what it's like to be Jew today and what is the Jewish stories in these 3 countries. Hopefully ending up by having an understanding that Scandinavia has a lot of things in common and Jewish Scandinavia has even more in common. So that's the end of our presentation. And now, Dora, you can round up.
Yes, thank you so much. So there was someone who asked if you could put back the itinerary. So maybe while we do the Q&A, we can just leave that there so people can kind of browse through and have a more idea of what you're going to be doing exactly. But of course, tomorrow we will send out detailed itinerary. You will be able to read through all the information. We will also send you the registration link, which is not, you don't need to pay anything yet, but if you're interested in this tour and you want to be in touch with Charlotte and Ronen, or you have questions, then please fill out that form and they will be in touch with you, and then you can take it from there. So you will receive all that tomorrow. So I will read some questions. Some of them you mentioned briefly, or they were on the slide. slides, but just to make sure that everyone gets properly answered, I'll read them again. So there were some questions about food, whether there is kosher options, vegan options, is it Shabbat friendly? You had it on the slide that not exactly, but can you elaborate a bit how that looks like?
So regarding kosher, it's always what is the standard of kosher? So what we will make for sure is that it's always possible to have a vegetarian or a fish dish when we have our lunches
And
and dinners. Besides, in the synagogue on Friday, it's fully kosher, highest standards, the Jewish Community Center. But otherwise, it's up to the people what standard do they have. They will have an option, so they don't have to eat something that they would not like to eat. And we're not going to have a tour on Saturday before we're leaving for Norway, but we are traveling on the cruise from Saturday afternoon to Sunday morning. But there is free time there to participate, to go to the synagogue for the Shabbat service. And just to emphasize that there's also going to be a lot of time during the days where people can explore Copenhagen, Oslo, and Stockholm by themselves. So it's not only going to be tours 10 hours a day where they have no free time, but we make a perfect mixture so people will learn a lot and experience a lot, but also have time to discover the cities by themselves.
Thank you. And there was a question if there are any vegan options. You mentioned vegetarian, but are there vegan?
I think we'll have to look into that because if we have a few vegans participating, we will ask our suppliers, what can you do that's vegan? It's very big also in Scandinavia.
I'm sure it can be
It
worked
can be
out.
worked out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Is the tour wheelchair accessible?
Oh, we didn't think about it. We don't know the answer.
Okay.
We'll get back on that.
Okay. Thank you. Does the price include airfare?
It's not including airfare to and from Scandinavia. So the flight ticket from the US, for example, or the flight tickets back from Stockholm after the tour is completed, it's not included in the price. But everything from when you set foot on Copenhagen ground, we have the hotel and we have, as you saw, we have breakfast every morning. It's going to be great breakfast. We have 7 lunches and 4 dinners. So actually, you don't really have to invest a lot of money going out to dine by yourself because it's covered in the price
But
that you
all the transportation you wanted to say, like the cruise to Oslo and flying from Oslo by plane from Oslo to Sweden, that is included, but not the airfare to and from Scandinavia.
Thank you. What is the stress level of the tour or the difficulty of the tour? Like, how many hours are you touring a day? Like, if you can mention a bit about that.
sure. We know, not to be judgmental, but we know this probably is very appealing to people who are not 20 years old. So we really made a huge effort to make this very convenient for people. And many of the tours is including a bus, so it's easy to go around. Um, there is some walking, a few parts that are walking tours, but it's not very long distances. It's, and the pace is slow. There's plenty of time. And as I just mentioned before, it's not going to be very long days. Besides the Louisiana Art Museum Kronborg Day, which is the longest one, it's 8 hours. It's usually 3, 4, 5 hour
Yeah.
tours. So if you leave in the morning, like 10 o'clock, you're maybe done by 1, 2, or 3, and you have the rest of the day off to do for yourself to walk around the cities. So we're really, because we have also personally been on tours where you go from 8 o'clock in the morning to 8 o'clock at night and you're so tired. So we want to make this a very pleasant experience to feel the calmness of Scandinavia, the coolness, the relaxed environment we have here. People are really very chilled to be also a part of the tour. So people are not stressed. So people don't have to work, get up very, very early in the morning to do everything before 8 o'clock in the morning. We will have a slow pace, nice time to wake up, have a nice, relaxing breakfast, and then head out for a tour.
Thank you. Could you repeat what the price is?
Yeah.
Someone would like to see again.
This is all that's included. It's really a lot.
Thank you. For US citizens, what are the visa requirements, if there are any?
Actually, I don't know. I think there's a visa agreement because we've been to the States a few times. You just have to sign into some portal in the Danish Foreign Ministry to require to get a visa to come to Denmark and travel around the Scandinavian countries. I think we have a cooperation with the US,
Mm.
so it's very easy. It's not difficult. Never heard about any problems. And we have like many thousand American tourists coming every year for our Jewish tours in Copenhagen. We never heard about anybody who had difficulties requiring a visa to come into the country.
Thank you. Will there be time to visit Tivoli Gardens?
Of course,
Of course
of
there will.
course.
Okay. Yes, some people are mentioning that there might be new requirements for American citizens for Schengen, that we can look into it, or
Yeah,
if I guess by the summer we'll know. And Canadians, what about Canadians? Do you know for
I think it's the
visas?
same. It's
Yeah.
no problem.
Okay, how many people will be ex you expect on this trip? What is the minimum? What is the maximum numbers?
Mhm. We have a minimum of 10 and a maximum of 25. Thanks for asking.
Thank you. Let me see if there are other questions. Um, yeah, I see if, Norway. Will you see anything in Norway other than Oslo?
No, unfortunately not. Um, you could add, we decided not to do it on this tour because we want to have, it should not be too long. So they're not going to be like a fjord cruise as part of the tour, at least not this first tour. Maybe if there's a requirement for that of many people, we'll consider that in the next tour. But it's only going to be the three capitals, Copenhagen, Oslo, and Stockholm. And then there's one tour outside Copenhagen one day. But besides that, it's centered around the capitals
Right.
because this is also where you have the Jewish stories. You cannot go to the countryside and experience a lot of Jewish stories in these three countries because they all are located in the center of the
But we
capital.
promise you, going to Oslo, especially because we go there by boat, you will get the experience of the fjords, the very famous and beautiful fjords. The sailing in is for hours, actually. While you have your breakfast, you see that beautiful, beautiful fjord of Oslo. So you will get a sense of it.
Thank you. Are transfers from the airport to the hotel and transfers from the hotel to the airport included?
No, they're not included because we don't know when people are coming. When we have an overview of when people are arriving, we can organize some transportation, joint transportation. But as now, it's not included in the price. The Copenhagen airport is it's very easy to get from the airport to the hotel. It's just next to the major train station in Nørreport, so it takes about 20 minutes,
Or by
or
taxi,
by taxi,
even shorter.
even shorter. Yeah,
So it's
there's
quite
even a
easy.
metro. It's
Yeah,
very easy
yeah.
to come from, and also to Stockholm. There's train going straight to the airport.
Thank
I
you.
I
And
don't
will
know if
you
we
need to, sorry, if you have a question, please put them in the chat. We are still too many to allow unmuting. So I just kindly ask everyone to put your questions in the chat box and we'll try to read everything. Will you need to change to local currency? And what are the will you need to change to local currency? And what are the local currencies in the different countries?
All right. Yeah. So Denmark is a member of the European Union. However, Denmark has decided not to join the same currency. So we do not have the euro as they have in most of the European countries by now. We have a Danish kroner. So that's still the local currency. However, Denmark is the country with the least cash used amongst people. So people don't really use a lot of cash, very, very little. If you have a credit card, international one like the MasterCard, for instance, even American Express, which can be a little more complicated, but otherwise Visa and all those major credit cards, they can be used everywhere.
And Apple Pay, if you have that installed.
Yeah, sure. There are many other options.
Nobody cares around money in these
Not
countries.
much,
No.
not much.
And Sweden and Norway, what are
Yeah,
their
the same. The
currencies?
same. They have
Same.
their own local currency, Norwegian krona and Swedish krona. I don't know. I think we're very proud of our krona system. We don't want to go into the euros like the rest of Europe. But you don't really have to withdraw money from a cash machine, from an ATM. You can pay everywhere with a credit card.
Yeah, but also the biggest shops, how do you say, department stores, souvenir shops, they do accept American dollars and euros for that matter.
Thank you. Um, Another question about the transfers from the airport to the hotel. I'll just make it general. Once people sign up and you see when they're arriving, will you be helping them to find their ways around and know how to get from the airport to the hotel?
Of
We will
course.
be very happy to help people. So, of course.
Thank you. So we'll just encourage everyone to, if you sign up and you will go on this tour, to be in touch with Charlotte and Ronan, and I'm sure they're gonna give a very personalized attention to participants and share all the necessary information you will need to get from the airport to the hotel and for anything else that you may need.
I just
I'm
want
trying.
to add one thing that you're gonna have a brilliant tour leader, my wife. I'm giving her up for you, so she can be in charge of everything that's going on. So is there any problem during the tour, she will fix it. So you can be you feel very safe that everything is taken care of and it's the best of hands. And you
31 years.
31 years, and I'm only 30. No.
Thank you. Is there tax to add? I guess because, in the US, many prices are given without tax, like they give a price and then they add
Yeah.
a tax on
No.
top of it.
No tax on top of this
This is the
price.
final price.
Yeah.
No,
Great.
no extras.
Thank you. So I hope I read all the questions. Apologies, I won't read more questions about anti-Semitism because we discussed that, I think, at the end of our history tour. So I see that there were a few questions about that. Um, okay, I think we went through everything, but if anyone has any questions left, uh, okay, there's a question I won't be able to read. So Charlotte or Ronan, please check the last one because it has a lot of uh, Danish letters. Will there be Rod Grod med Flode in Denmark?
Okay, interesting. This person who wrote this know that we have like a tongue twister, which is Danish is a very complicated language, and rødgrød med fløde means berry porridge with cream. So if you want to practice Danish, this is the line you should be able to pronounce perfectly. Well done. We'll work on it when you get here.
Great. Thank you. So, as I mentioned earlier, we will send out all the information, the registration form, which will help you to ask questions and be in touch with Charlotte and Ronan. So you will be able to find out more if any of your questions were not answered today. But we hope you will know everything, and also you will receive the detailed itinerary with much more information. So you can browse through that tomorrow, or you can rewatch also this talk tomorrow. We will send out the recording. Okay, and then one final question that is a bit more about the history part, but we can close it with this. Can you explain why the radical difference between the fate of Jews in Norway and Denmark?
Yeah, I think we already elaborated on that, but one of the main differences was that Denmark decided to cooperate with the Nazi occupiers, and in Norway, they tried to fight them back. So in Denmark, the system really worked. You have the policemen, you had the government, you have the parliament still in control, And then, they found an agreement that we'll make this work together. And a lot of farmers were sending food to the German troops. And because of that, the Danish Jews were not arrested. In Norway, they had a Nazi government with Vidrun Quisling, who was a Nazi,
Norwegian
Norwegian
Nazi.
Nazi, that they were ruling Norway. So it was a very different story, and there were no warning for the Norwegian Jews to take hide because they were going to be arrested. And when you look at the numbers throughout Europe, actually that more than 60% of the Norwegian Jews survived Second World War, most of them in Sweden. It's not a story you talk about a lot. You always talk about the 40% of the Norwegian Jews that were killed in the camps. I think had the story been the same in Denmark, that only 60% of Danish Jews managed to escape to Sweden, I think the miraculous rescue would not be a story so well known. But because almost all the Jews was taken to Sweden, the Jews that were caught and sent to Theresienstadt, they got food parcels every month, made their possibility to survive much better. Like my great grandfather, he was 70 years old when he was caught. He survived more than 1.5 years in Theresienstadt and came back. He was, as they said, skin and bone when he returned, but he survived. That made that the death toll of the Danish Jews was so low that it stood out as a miracle, a beacon of hope, a light in the dark. That's why the Jewish Museum in Copenhagen it was designed by Daniel Libeskind, the famous American architect. That this museum it's called Mitzvah, honoring the amazing deed the Danish nation did to help and rescue their Jewish citizens. So that's the main difference.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I see that there are a few more questions, and I really encourage everyone who is very interested in this region. First of all, we will have a virtual talk, a virtual tour, another talk more in depth about Norway in a couple of weeks. So we'll send you information also about that. But most of all, I really hope that some of you will decide to go on this tour and explore for yourself and see all these wonderful and beautiful places and learn much more in depth about the history and also about the present day life of the Jews of Scandinavia. So thank you so much, everyone who commented and shared stories and had questions. We really appreciate that you came and that you're curious, and we hope that you learned a lot today. There were many comments, by the way, Charlotte and Ronan, that people really liked your presentation and they really learned a lot. And thank you so much, Charlotte and Ronan, to create this presentation and have this tour where you really share these three really connected and very special stories together. We do believe that it's a very unique addition to the Jewish story and to learn about the Jews of Scandinavia this way. So thank you so much, and we'll send out all the information tomorrow, and we hope to see all of you soon on other events.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you, everyone, and have a good night or a very good afternoon, depending on where you are. And we hope to see you all soon.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Thank you.